Hi, my name is Stephen Terrell, and today I'm going to talk about the internship course for my position at One Call, where I'm a full-time network engineer and I spend my time working to support the hardware and software infrastructure of the business. What we do is support clients and customers who are making claims for workers' compensation. We're located downtown Jacksonville, where our headquarters is, and part of my role is to be an on-site engineer there and support things such as printers, wireless access points, conference rooms, telephony, and of course our sister remote locations where we have our data center and cloud products where the big part of the business is for the applications and how our clients and our business interact with one another. So far, I've spent about 7 months here at this role, and so far it has been quite the experience. As I mentioned, what we do is we help clients who are seeking workers' compensation, and we're headquartered here in Jacksonville, Florida, where we have a pretty decent sized office location. There's a lot of endpoint devices and a lot of infrastructure that is at that office there at our headquarters, and part of my job is to assist end users who are there, or maybe if there is a large meeting, we need to make sure that all of the Wi-Fi looks okay and that there aren't any issues. And we monitor those sort of connections, or in some instances, we make sure that if someone has to work from home and maybe they're coming into the office, we have to make sure that that area is prepped and ready for them, since COVID has kind of changed a lot of things on how we operate on a day-to-day basis. So my role, I'm a network engineer, and I get to work with a lot of different technologies that are located in Jacksonville and located at some of our remote sites. I get to spend a lot of time in Cisco CLI, resolving issues with printers, resolving issues with teleconference phones. Maybe something isn't on the right VLAN, or maybe one of the access points went down, so we have to exchange that appliance for one that is working, and then update some of the configurations, make sure it comes online. Those are some pretty solid examples of something that I may occasionally deal with in the office space there. We have had some of our partners or our vendors come in and have to install new circuits and run fiber connections, and so I escort them to the building while they do their testing, while they run cables and hook up some of their equipment. And then of course, configure the side on our end there to handle that incoming connection as well. We do have over 1,000 end users and employees. We have a multi-vendor hybrid cloud situation where there are tons of different things to work with as far as technologies go. We have an F5 load balancer. Of course, we have Azure, because who isn't in the Microsoft space now these days? We have a Cisco VPN, which has become very common in a lot of businesses, and that is something else that I support, not only for my location, but for all remote users, which can, it can be several different things that could be the issue if you're having a VPN issue, and it's part of my responsibility to kind of sift through what that issue may be, where that kind of falls on the OSI model, or if it's an issue with the hardware, and categorizing those things. And half the fun of being a network engineer is getting to log into devices, whether they're here in Jacksonville or if they're located, halfway across the world, and getting the chance to restart some of those and getting to feel the feeling of that stress a little bit, right? No one's there. It's locked away in a data center somewhere, and now you're running some command that needs to have a reload done on it, or maybe something else has gone poorly and you have to reboot to recover. And so some of those situations can definitely be pretty stressful, and a lot of times to do some of that stuff you have to look at the administrative side of it as well, and make sure that you're submitting the proper change tickets for auditing purposes, and make sure that other teams are aware of what's going on whenever you're just making configuration changes to devices, especially if those devices are used in a production environment daily. And even still, if it's a test environment, right? We still want to let other teams and our colleagues know, kind of what's going on for making some higher level changes, right? Typically, if you're, adding something, adding a new feature, adding new functionality, like creating a username, creating a group, doesn't necessarily have to be communicated as much. But if you're, changing something that's been the standard for a while and then something is changing that is going to be impactful, you definitely want to communicate those things out. So a lot of meetings, right? So we have to all kind of collaborate and work together and make sure we know, who is changing what on what appliance. So I spent a lot of time in CLI looking at log reports, creating change tickets to back up my reasoning for making these changes or approving other people's changes as well, making sure that other teams are informed of the changes that we're trying to make. And sometimes I got to get in there in the CLI to look at end user problems. Sometimes I can just log into their machine and do some pings and do some tests and make sure that they're, working the way that they're supposed to, or, hopefully it's something pretty quick and easy as far as the printers and phones go, because otherwise, there's a couple of other teams that need to get their hands involved, take a look at the ticket, take a look at the issue, take a look at the devices, and it can become a nuisance, become time consuming for something that, just seems like it should just be a lot easier than it really is. Data center projects. This has been probably my most enjoyable aspect of being a network engineer, not only at One Call, but in other positions as well. And while working as an engineer here at One Call, I've been fortunate enough for them to send me to Seattle, Washington to go to a data center and work on a project there where we were decommissioning servers and adding servers and decommissioning old switches and moving switches. And really, I was just an extra set of hands, and we had to reconfigure some of the switches, which are some of the Nexus platform Cisco devices, which are meant for data centers, right? And so that was not so much a challenge mentally as far as the actual work goes and the configurations that needed to be done. Long story short, from a network perspective, it was really just an ether channel setup. But from the physical hardware side, we had to move and decommission a lot of stuff, which was a really good time. It always feels good to get out of the office and get out of the remote office and get into the data center a little bit and see what you're actually configuring whenever you are working remotely, and cleaning up a bunch of cables and upgrading SFP models and doing whatever you can to make sure that things are a little bit more optimized while you have that limited time in that space, since we traveled for a week up there. But that was fun. That's probably, like I said, like that's probably the most fun that I have whenever I get to work with devices. I like being in the data center and working with the servers, the switches, connecting everything up, physically seeing how everything is connected, being able to accurately define my descriptions on what we're connecting is a really big way to make an impact. It seems so simple, right? But just having that documentation readily available for anybody that logs into the devices to know what's connected from one end to the other is paramount, and not only network design and documentation, but and also teamwork and resolving issues whenever you're needing to troubleshoot. And it goes for whenever we have remote hands as well. Instead of them having trace a cable, I can already tell them exactly what cable we need to look at if there ever is an issue, which unfortunately there has been after we had left Seattle. But that's neither here nor there. That's some just additional project work, and I'm hoping that I get sent back to Seattle because I did enjoy myself out there. And of course, there's the headquarters projects. This is where, I spend my time at the headquarters in Jacksonville here for One Call as a network engineer. And while I'm not spending my time resolving issues or looking at some of our configurations at the data center, I'm performing upgrades and looking at ways to optimize or implement new technologies into our environment, and not always by choice. The very first thing listed here, the bullet point, faxing protocol, I have pretty limited experience with telephony, and so I was put on a project here in Jacksonville for faxing, and it was quite the challenge, but also a really good learning experience. I was able to work with Cisco and work with some vendors and be able to modify some configurations here in Jacksonville to be able to handle the faxing protocol T.38. So that was a really fun experience, right? I really enjoy learning new technologies. I don't shy away from a challenge, and this was definitely a good one. And this one's actually still a little bit ongoing. But some of the other ones haven't been as bad. While it is fun to get into the data center and mess with physical equipment, being back in the headquarters in the office environment and having to put my hands on access points are not as fun. Usually I'll be dressed in a nice shirt or be wearing just, dark clothes in general, and I'll have to get up in the ceiling or get on a ladder and get up on near an access point where just dust and grossness and white stuff from the ceiling is just gonna break apart and get all over my glasses and everything. So not as fun, but of course, a healthy wireless environment is necessary for an office to, operate. And the better that those access points are managed and, upgraded and working, the less complaints there's going to be about performance, and everything is going to work the way that we want it to. Some of the conference rooms, can definitely be an issue, right? So sometimes there are VIPs or white gloves who travel into Jacksonville, right? Because we're the headquarters here for one call. And I mean, the CEO will come and have conferences. And if there's an issue with the phone or an issue with any of the TVs or anything, I'm definitely one of the first people that they call to come and take a look to see what's going on, because that's a pretty big deal. We try to have these really nice conference rooms set up in the office and everything. I think that they work great most of the time, but some of the devices that we have just go to sleep, and so recovering them isn't always the best thing from an end user perspective, and sometimes things can get a little more broken whenever they're trying to troubleshoot, but things happen, right? So, and then the last one here is the hardware decommission, and that's just generally just throwing stuff away, which I think everyone loves to do, right? Just clearing out space, getting rid of old stuff that's no longer necessary, and we go about it the right way for sure. We partner with a e-waste company, and so nothing goes missed, from an Ethernet cable, a Cat5 Ethernet cable, to laptops, hard drives, servers, more access points. Any of it gets thrown into a box and shipped away, and they're able to handle it from there. But this has been a really good thing for me, being able to get back into an office and kind of have a hybrid role. I've been working remotely for a couple years now, and being full remote does have its perks, and I definitely prefer it. But it's nice to have a couple of different options to kind of travel to and get my work done whenever there's, if there's an issue at headquarters or a project going on at headquarters, it's nice to be able to pop in there and not have to worry about being remote and rely on someone else. So that's a pretty good convenience for me. I've mentioned it a couple times already, that we are a multi-vendor environment, and of course we have different providers for different resources. We are a hybrid environment as well, so we utilize cloud infrastructure such as Amazon and Azure. Those are two of the most popular choices by far, and being that I have a CCNA and am working towards my CCNP, we are a Cisco shop, and so we do have Cisco switches and routers and firewall appliances. So it's nice to work with familiar equipment, and we're pretty engaged with these vendors and providers pretty heavily. Not only from them taking us out to lunch and and enjoying ourselves, but working on a lot of projects to get new implementations installed, new circuits installed, new features installed, new licensing, making sure that everything is up to date just constantly because of how vast our environment is. And at any given moment, I feel like any part of these little things can start to go wrong, and you'll almost immediately see an impact and see responses from our vendors, whether it's an automated response or not. But they're pretty good about getting on the ball if something does fall between the cracks. But that doesn't happen too often, thankfully. I'm actually currently on call right now, and things have been pretty quiet. Knock on wood. Hopefully, don't jinx myself. But being such a large, I guess, enterprise business, we have that customer support available 24 by 7, 365, and then some. So if, we request a certain resource or a certain tier of resource, they're going to go ahead and provide it. And that is a very fortunate thing to have while working in IT. There are smaller businesses, of course, that don't have these level of partnerships, which can make, support take longer than usual, or maybe you're not getting the support that you need, or you're not able to talk to the right people that you need. But things happen. I definitely enjoy working with Microsoft and Cisco. I've worked with some other vendors in the past who are not so pleasurable to work with, and sometimes things do take a little bit of time to get back from a troubleshooting perspective. But I understand that these guys are not only extremely talented, they're also extremely busy as well. And since there's so many customers that they have, it's going to take a long time to start getting support from them. They sometimes say that working in IT is a bit of a thankless job, right? We're kind of just working in the background, and as long as there's no issues and everything's working, then you're not going to really hear from us. And so not only am I a network engineer, I'm also a network administrator, and I need to manage a lot of the stuff on the network that isn't so much of the good times of CLI configurations and firewall configurations. And sometimes what that looks like is having to make backup configurations, a lot of copy and pasting sometimes, or using some automation tools to essentially download backups and push those configurations to somewhere else for safekeeping. There's also a lot of just overall monitoring that goes into the amount of devices that we have, because monitoring tools are so powerful. Not only is it going to take a look at the device from the perspective of if it's online or not, it can get so granular. It can look at every single process that's running. It can look at the CPU itself. It can look at every single interface. It can look at all the errors on the interfaces and report back tons of information, which is wonderful, of course, right? But sometimes there is information overload, and part of my job is to make sure that the devices that are in our management system are essentially up to standard, right? If there's information that really isn't relevant, then we don't need to be keeping track of it. We don't need to be logging that data, or even spending time looking at that data, because there's so much other data that does need attention to detail reporting on and auditing as well. A huge part of this is looking at the vulnerability patches, version control, firmware updates, firmware control, making sure that like devices and similar devices are all operating at the same hardened version or hardened firmware version, because there's so many security vulnerabilities and different sort of backdoors and issues and API problems that I don't want to say continuously pop up, but are definitely out there and relevant to network engineers and network administrators or anyone working in the IT space. Working in IT always presents a unique challenge. No 2 days have ever been the same, I feel like, and working with end users and working with CEOs and everyone in between has been one of the most unique experiences that I've been fortunate enough to have. But it is rewarding too, even though it is challenging, and there's definitely just always so much going on. Working in IT is definitely a lifestyle, and having an internship or having a entry level position and getting your foot in the door somewhere to start to understand some of these things and how it operates from, not only the service desk perspective to where you're handling tickets and phone calls and resolving issues, but to all of the budgeting and project planning and ordering and all the stuff that also just continuously goes on in the background supporting, everything else that everyone else is doing as well, all at the same time, which is just, it sounds kind of weird, but it takes a village, right? And so there's always so much to learn from so many different perspectives. That's why I think that, me personally, I enjoy being an individual contributor. I don't ever plan to be a manager or go any further working with projects or anything like that, because there are so many different avenues and directions that you can take from, financial, HR, any of it. It's all IT related. There's a position that if you want to do, or if you want to work in that field, you can definitely do so. I think that everyone should definitely try to get an internship and at least work at the bottom, so that way they kind of understand those lower level tasks, if you will, of creating a ticket and just understanding the flow and the process, instead of being one of those people who submit a ticket and say, hey, I just sent you this 5 minutes ago, like, why isn't it fixed, or why haven't you responded? There's a process to everything. There are certain steps that need to be taken, certain people that need to be contacted, pulled in, reviewed, all sorts of stuff that is never really considered. But, of course, working in IT, we have that perspective. And so that's been able to give me a lot of patience, working with anyone who's, either at the help desk level or working with some of these VIPs and CEO people, who may expect things to get done a specific way or are used to getting things done in a quickly manner, but sometimes that isn't always the case whenever working in IT. But yeah, everyone should definitely take the time to challenge themselves, whether it be in the form of an internship, new technologies, or getting certifications. I think that it's really healthy to do so, especially working in IT, if that is your goal. The internship course itself overall has been a joy. It's been kind of nice writing out all the stuff that I've been doing and just seeing exactly, what's going into these 40 hours I'm putting into every week. I hope that you have enjoyed watching this, and good luck the rest of the semester.